Picture this. You're walking through a sacred forest, and you stumble upon something you were never meant to see. In that single moment, your entire life transforms into a nightmare from which there's no escape. This is exactly what happened to Actaeon, a young hunter whose fatal glimpse of the goddess Artemis would cost him everything. In ancient Greece, stories like these weren't just entertainment. They were powerful lessons about respecting divine boundaries and understanding humanity's place in a world ruled by capricious gods. The Greeks believed their deities walked among mortals, invisible yet ever-present, watching and judging every action. Greek mythology emerged from a civilization that flourished over 3,000 years ago. These stories helped explain natural phenomena, taught moral lessons, and reinforced social order. The gods weren't distant, perfect beings. They were passionate, jealous, and quick to anger, making them both relatable and terrifying. Actaeon was no ordinary mortal. Born into nobility as the grandson of Cadmus, founder of Thebes, he embodied the ideal Greek youth. Strong, athletic, and skilled in the hunt, he represented everything admirable about young Greek men. His expertise with bow and spear made him legendary among his peers. But Actaeon's true passion was hunting. He spent countless hours in the wilderness, tracking deer through dense forests and scaling rocky cliffs in pursuit of wild boar. His pack of hunting hounds was famous throughout Boeotia. These weren't just animals to him, they were companions, each with a name, each trained to respond to his voice. The goddess who would seal his fate was Artemis, one of the 12 Olympians and Apollo's twin sister. Known as the Eternal Virgin, she ruled over the hunt, wild animals, and childbirth. Her silver bow never missed its target, and her arrows could bring either swift death or healing. Artemis was fiercely protective of her chastity and demanded absolute respect from mortals. She surrounded herself with a group of nymphs who had sworn to remain virgins forever. Anyone who dared to violate her privacy or threaten her purity faced swift and merciless punishment. The goddess had a particular fondness for secluded groves and crystal-clear springs where she could bathe undisturbed. These sacred spaces were forbidden to mortals, protected by divine law and ancient taboo. Our story begins on a sweltering summer day, when the sun blazed mercilessly across the Greek landscape. Actaeon had been hunting since dawn with his faithful hounds, pursuing a magnificent stag through the hills near Mount Cithaeron. The chase had been long and exhausting, and by midday, both hunter and hounds were desperately thirsty. As the heat became unbearable, Actaeon called off the hunt. He dismissed his companions, telling them to return home while he searched for water. His hounds panted heavily, their tongues lolling as they sought shade beneath the ancient oak trees. Wandering deeper into the forest than ever before, Actaeon discovered a hidden valley he'd never seen. Ancient cypress trees formed a natural cathedral, their branches filtering the harsh sunlight into gentle, dappled patterns. The air here felt cooler, almost sacred. At the valley's heart lay a crystal-clear pool fed by a natural spring. The water sparkled like liquid diamonds, so pure and inviting that Actaeon felt drawn to it immediately. This was exactly what he and his hounds needed. But as he approached the water's edge, Actaeon heard something that made him freeze. Soft laughter echoed through the grove, musical and otherworldly. Female voices spoke in hushed tones, their words carrying an authority that made his skin prickle with unease. Curiosity overcame caution. Actaeon crept closer, pushing aside the low-hanging branches that concealed the pool's far shore. What he saw there would haunt him for the brief remainder of his life. Artemis herself stood waist-deep in the sacred pool, her divine beauty more radiant than the sun. Water cascaded from her perfect form as her nymphs attended her, some holding silver vessels, others arranging her bow and arrows on the grassy bank. The goddess's skin seemed to glow with inner light, and her dark hair flowed like liquid night down her shoulders. This was divinity in its purest form, beauty so overwhelming that mortal eyes could barely comprehend it. Actaeon stood transfixed, unable to look away despite knowing he'd stumbled into forbidden territory. Time seemed suspended as he witnessed this most private of divine moments. Then Artemis sensed his presence. The goddess's head snapped toward the trees where Actaeon hid, Her silver eyes blazed with fury as they locked onto his horrified face. The nymphs gasped and quickly moved to shield their mistress from view, but the damage was done. "Mortal!" Artemis's voice rang through the grove like thunder. "How dare you violate this sacred place? How dare you look upon what no man should see?" Actaeon tried to speak, to explain that he'd meant no disrespect, that he'd only been seeking water for his hounds. But terror had stolen his voice. He could only stand there, trembling, as divine wrath focused upon him like the point of a spear. Artemis raised her hand, and Actaeon felt a terrible change beginning in his body. His bones started to crack and reshape themselves. His spine curved and elongated. His hands became hooves, his arms transformed into slender legs. The goddess's curse was swift and merciless. "Since you have seen what mortals must not see, you shall never speak of it to anyone. Let the hunter become the hunted." Antlers burst from Actaeon's skull, magnificent but heavy. His human skin became a dappled brown hide. His face stretched into a deer's muzzle. His eyes grew large and dark. Within moments, where a young nobleman had stood, now trembled a magnificent stag. But Actaeon's mind remained human. He could think, feel, and remember everything about his former life. He understood exactly what had happened to him and what it meant. The horror of this realization was perhaps the cruelest part of Artemis's punishment. As the transformation completed, Actaeon heard a sound that filled his new deer heart with terror. His own hunting hounds were approaching, following his scent through the forest. They'd grown restless, waiting, and had come to find their master. The pack burst into the clearing, 50 strong hunting dogs bred for speed and ferocity. They saw the magnificent stag and immediately forgot about their missing master. Their hunting instincts took over completely. Actaeon tried to call to them, but only deer sounds emerged from his throat. He attempted to approach them calmly, hoping they might recognize something familiar about him. Instead, his movement triggered their chase response. The pack surrounded him, snarling and snapping. These were the same dogs he'd raised from puppies, trained with his own hands, fed from his own table. Now they saw only prey. Actaeon turned and fled through the forest he knew so well. His new form was swift, but the hounds were swifter. They'd been trained too well, bred too perfectly for this very purpose. The chase was brutal and brief. The dogs cornered their quarry in a rocky ravine where Actaeon had often rested during previous hunts. Ironically, he would die in one of his favorite places. As the pack closed in, Actaeon's human mind screamed silently. He thought of his family, his friends, his life cut short by a moment's curiosity. He understood now why the gods demanded such absolute respect. The end came quickly. The hounds that had once loved him tore him apart, never knowing they were killing their beloved master. Artemis watched from afar, her anger satisfied, but her expression unreadable. Actaeon's story became a powerful warning throughout the ancient world. It taught that some boundaries must never be crossed, that divine privacy was sacred, and that curiosity could prove fatal. The myth explores themes that remain relevant today. It questions the nature of punishment and justice. Was Actaeon's fate deserved? He committed no intentional crime, yet paid the ultimate price. The story also examines transformation and identity. Actaeon retained his human consciousness while losing everything that made him human. This psychological horror resonates with anyone who's felt trapped by circumstances beyond their control. Artists throughout history have been captivated by this tale. Renaissance painters depicted the moment of transformation, while poets explored the psychological anguish of Actaeon's final moments. The story continues inspiring modern literature, film, and art. Actaeon's myth reminds us that in the ancient Greek worldview, mortals lived at the mercy of divine whim. Respect for the gods wasn't just religious duty, but practical survival. One moment's transgression could destroy everything. The tale endures because it speaks to universal human experiences, the consequences of crossing boundaries, the price of forbidden knowledge, and the tragic irony that our greatest strengths can become our destruction. Actaeon. The hunter became Actaeon the hunted, destroyed by the very skills and companions that once defined him. This is the power of Greek mythology, simple stories that reveal profound truths about human nature, divine justice, and the delicate balance between curiosity and respect that governs our relationship with forces beyond our understanding.